Coming up, I got a fun episode with Tim Clark. Tim's a former college football player and current social scientist with a PhD from Oxford University, who spends most of his days thinking about and educating the world's leaders on building personal emotional intelligence and organizational psychological safety. Tim's actually one of the world's leading experts on these topics, but really, he's kind of a jack of all trades. In fact, I'm not sure there's much out there that he hasn't studied, from social science to economics to politics to international relations to Korean. Tim served his mission to Seoul, Korea from 1983 to 1985, an experience he says he, quote, wouldn't trade for anything. Tim's married and is a father to 6 kids. He currently lives in Alpine, Utah. In this episode, my buddy Jake joins me to talk with Tim about playing on a Lavell Edwards-led BYU football team, the challenges and satisfaction of learning a language, contingent self-esteem, the spectrum of influence in leadership, and how breaking down ethnocentricity leads to personal and spiritual development. It's a real masterclass. All this coming up next.
Four kids?
That's right. Yeah, we've got 4, 5, and under. So we've stayed busy. My wife and I just hit 7 years this last week. So
Wow. Well, good for you. That's pretty ambitious. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's going to be a pig and a python. I mean, they're all going to move together, right?
That's the plan.
Yeah. There are a lot of benefits to that. They can go to school together and be good friends, and that's wonderful.
Sam's just a few weeks out though from his first, right?
Yeah, less than a month. Well, no, month tomorrow is the due day. So.
Really?
Yeah. Jake was like, "Are you ready?" I'm like, "How ready can you be to prepare to be hit by a bus?" I just don't know. You can prepare for that.
I know. That's great. Yeah. Very exciting. Almost here.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So, anyway, Tim, you were a triple major at BYU. Let's see if I have it all correct here. You were a triple major at BYU. You got a master's in government and economics at the U. You did a PhD in social science from Oxford. And additionally, you've written 5 books and over 200 articles published in places like HBR, Forbes, etc. Do I have all that right?
Something like that.
You have you need anything else to put on your plate? You don't have enough going on? You're a busy guy.
Yeah, it's kind of what happened. It's been a good journey. It's been professionally a very eclectic path. No one could ever design it, but it's been good, and really appreciated the opportunities for education. And I grew up in locker rooms when I was a kid, football and wrestling. That's how I got to BYU, and went to school for a year, played a year, and then went to Korea on my mission. So that's how it started.
I wanted to go into your football experience at BYU because you were at BYU playing football when BYU was really good at football. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your playing experience, and especially playing under Lavell.
Let's see. As I said, I played 1 year, my freshman year, and then I missed the 2 most successful years that BYU ever had. They only lost 1 game for the next 2 years. And so that's when I left. I'll tell you a funny story though. So I served my mission in the Seoul, Korea mission, and I was pretty bulked up when I left because we just finished the season, and I played defensive end, and I lost 50 pounds eating kimchi and rice. And so when I came back, I still remember I went in for my interview with Lavell, and I was so skinny, I was embarrassed. So I put on 2 pairs of sweat, 1 pair of sweats over another pair, to give me the appearance of being a little beefier than I was. I was so skinny when I came back. I still remember that. Yeah, I went in and had my kind of return interview after being gone, and it didn't work though. I was so skinny, I had to play linebacker for a year before I got back to the line.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was a good experience. Yeah, I think What Lavell did well is that he just validated you as a person. And as you can imagine, it's one thing to have a basketball team where they've got 12 guys, something like that, versus an army. A football team is an army. It's a machine. You've got all these players and coaches and trainers and doctors, and it's an entire city. And so it's a different animal altogether. And not only that, but it's a game of controlled intensity. So you've got people getting hurt. Football is a game of full speed human collision. Humans are probably not made for that, but that's what we do. And so at any given time, you've got players that are getting hurt. You've got players that are not playing. You've got players that are being bumped out of starting roles. You've got all kinds of dynamics and hardship and adversity going on at any given time. And so how do you manage that? How do you lead in that kind of environment? It's difficult. You can't control what happens. Lavell, as the head coach, he doesn't directly coach anybody. He doesn't coach anybody, right? He
manages everybody.
He has position coaches. They do the coaching. He presides at the top of this hierarchy and at the top of this system. So it's very important for him to do what? Set the tone, model the way, establish the prevailing norms of the culture and really the terms of engagement. But he's not coaching you directly, right? He never coached me directly. He doesn't do that. That's not the job of a head coach. So he's responsible for the team overall, for culture, for performance and all those things. And I think what he did really well was, as I said, to create an inclusive environment and to validate the players at an individual level. I mean, think about it. What if you were a walk-on and you're there, you're bootstrapping it, you don't have any money, you're not getting any scholarship, and you're plugging away, you're playing meat squad, you're getting the soup knocked out of you every day. This is a tough thing to do. That's the nature of a football experience.
Jake, you were going to ask about wrestling. Jake was a wrestler. I know you wrestled too, Tim.
Yeah, you were involved in wrestling, and I didn't participate in football, but I can tell you that I derive a lot of my toughness that I took into my mission and even after from those experiences. So maybe you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, so those were the two sports that I did in high school, wrestling and football, probably because I didn't have the motor skills to do other things. I don't know. But those are gritty sports. And so you learn stamina, you learn endurance, and then you learn some things that are really conducive to, I think, missionary service too. The interesting thing about football is when you get hurt, you're out, right? You're out. You're not playing. All you're doing is rehabbing, training. And so you have to learn how to keep going without any kind of extrinsic motivation, social approval. And I would say that's really helpful for a mission, right?
Oh, yeah.
Tim, you're kind of a culture expert and you especially study emotional intelligence and psychological safety. And I'm curious, you've written several books. One of them is Psychological Safety. 4 stages of psychological safety, is that right? And I wondered if you could just condense those lessons into a 90-second recap for the listeners, because I think they'd be interested to hear your perspective on that too.
Sure. Psychological safety is a concept that was introduced by the noted psychologist Carl Rogers way back in 1954. And what it means is that you're creating a culture of rewarded vulnerability. And if you think about it, that's really what we call the central mechanism for culture formation in any organization or family or team or anything. And what that means is that human interaction by definition is a vulnerable activity, right? If we're interacting, we're engaging in a vulnerable activity. So anytime we're doing that, we have a choice. We can model vulnerability ourselves or not, and we can punish or reward the vulnerability of others. We're always doing that. And you can't opt out. If you're engaging with other humans, you're going to be doing that or not doing that. what I have found is that that's the central mechanism for culture formation, is modeling and then rewarding vulnerability. That's the essence of psychological safety, to create that kind of culture of rewarded vulnerability. And that's how we establish prevailing norms in any kind of organization or social collective. And so the research that I've been doing over the last few years is to understand empirically what's the pattern in the way that that grows, right? If you take a team, the level of psychological safety is not binary. It's a matter of degree. It could be low, could be high, could be somewhere in the middle. Okay, well, is there a pattern? Is there an empirical pattern in the way that it grows? And the answer is yes. And that's what I've focused on in the last couple of years in particular. And so we go through these stages. The first stage is what we call inclusion safety, which means that I feel included, I feel accepted, I have a sense of belonging. That's the foundation of human interaction. And then we go to stage 2. And by the way, the sequence, there's a linear progression. And the sequence is based on the way that humans go about satisfying their basic human needs. So stage 1 is, I want to satisfy the basic human need to be included and accepted and have a sense of belonging. After that, stage 2 is what we call learner safety. And learner safety means that I feel safe to engage in the learning process without fear of being embarrassed or marginalized or punished in some way. Right? So learning means, so I can engage in acts of learning vulnerability. I can ask a question. I can give or receive feedback. I can try something new. I can make a mistake, and I'll be rewarded for those acts of vulnerability. That's stage 2, learner safety. Then we go to stage 3, which is contributor safety. Contributor safety means that you feel safe and are given an opportunity to make a meaningful contribution. So that translates into an appropriate level of autonomy with guidance and support. So that's stage 3. So I have a chance to make a difference. I can make a meaningful contribution. And then stage 4, the culminating stage, is what we call challenger safety. Challenger safety means that you feel free and safe to challenge the status quo without fear of negative consequences, retaliation, retribution. And that is, when you get to stage 4, it's difficult because the nature of vulnerability is such that it's frightening to take on the status quo, right? But yet in organizations, we desperately need people to do that very thing because the nature of improvement, the nature of innovation requires constructive dissent. It requires creative abrasion. It requires a tolerance for candor. Innovation always requires deviation from the status quo. So that's the progression, the natural progression through stages of psychological safety. And so we, do a lot of work with organizations around the world to help them progress through and get to stage 4 and then hopefully maintain those conditions.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know if you feel like your thinking on that mostly came as a result of your studies and your continued, research and studies, or was it from your practical experience? I know you were a CEO several times, once at Geneva Steel, or a healthy mix of both that you've actually formulated those thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, I'd say both. I've learned a lot, Sam, from cultures that were not healthy, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So if you look at every culture, you can view them on a spectrum that runs from health to pathology. And as you look at cultures that are pathological, highly dysfunctional, or toxic, what do you see? If you do pattern recognition, very quickly, you'll see pervasive fear, right? So then you try to understand that. What does pervasive fear do to a person, and what does it do to an organization? What it does to a person is it thrusts them into a defensive routine. So they withdraw, they retreat, they recoil, and they self-censor. They manage personal risk. It's about loss avoidance. It's about self-preservation. They're not releasing their discretionary efforts. whoa, really? These are the patterns. Those patterns are profoundly important, because if you're trying to accomplish something on a team or in an organization, think about what fear is doing. Fear is immobilizing people. Fear is breaking the feedback loop. Fear is shutting people down. So we can learn so much about those patterns and then think about, all right, what do healthy, productive, high-performing teams do? The patterns are very different. People are leaning in. They're eagerly participating. They're releasing their discretionary efforts. They are suppressing their self-censoring instincts to go for it. Well, the implications are profoundly different, right? So I'm going to give a performance response if I feel safe. I'm going to give a fear response if I don't feel safe. That's not a little bit different. That's a lot different. Mm-hmm. And so when I was the plant manager at Geneva Steel for 5 years, I had an organization of about 2,700. I had about 500 managers and 2,200 bargaining unit union employees. And I would just pay attention to patterns. What's happening here? Why is it when I go to a certain area and I talk to the employees, the production and the maintenance employees, why do they not engage? Why are they so withdrawn? Why are they managing risk so tightly? What's going on here, right? And then you go to another area. So you'd see local variance in the cultural patterns. And if you're paying attention, that's helping you understand how that's linked to performance, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess my answer to your question, that's a long answer, Sam, but what do we do as social scientists? We're in the pattern recognition business. So I was just constantly paying attention, and I had the opportunity to be a practitioner running an organization. That's a rare privilege that gives you an opportunity to be a participant observer. And so I've always been fascinated. In fact, more than fascinated, just obsessed with trying to understand the relationship between culture and performance. And so I guess that's how I got here.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think we'll use that as a foundation as we skip onto the mission, because there's so many similar principles, I think, in mission experiences that as with leadership and business and all these other principles. So you mentioned already that you served in Seoul, South Korea, and being a football player, a college football player, I assume you planned on going on a mission, but was it a hard thing when it actually came down to it? What was your general attitude before getting a mission call?
Yeah, for me, it was not a hard decision. I had always wanted to serve a mission. Mm-hmm. So I took the helmet, the shoulder pads off, and that was always my intention and always my plan. I always wanted to do that. And there were coaches that tried to persuade me not to, and other people, but that was not a hard decision in my mind. I had always wanted to serve.
So South Korea, of all places, seeing that was your location, what was your first impression of South Korea? And then what was the more generalized context of South Korea at that time in the 80s?
Sure. So in the 80s, it was ostensibly a democracy, but it wasn't. The president was a dictator, Chun Doo-hwan at the time. And so the country lived under a dictatorship. He had come to power through a coup. But there was always an amicable relationship with the United States because of our joint security arrangement. We have roughly 40,000 troops that are deployed to South Korea that we keep there. So we felt safe, and as far as that goes, but that was the political environment. As far as just going there, everything was different. Everything was radically different. The food was different. The language was different. The culture was different. Everything was different. Sleeping on the floor and having a bucket shower, and then here's your kimchi and rice, and then let's go tract all day, and here's your companion. He doesn't speak any English. You thought you learned a little Korean, but you didn't learn anything. So welcome to the mission. Let's get after it. and it's monsoon season and you're sweating bullets, and what's not to love? Right.
So did you love it? I mean, it helps that you said, I want to go. I know I want to go, but getting out there and you can have a good attitude, but going through all those things I think it's hard to, how should I say, really embrace it. I guess in my own experience, I went on the mission and I really didn't come to find out that I loved what I was doing or that I was really appreciating the mission until a full year had gone by. So I'm curious if you adapted quickly and enjoyed it right away, or if there was any kind of curve there.
Yeah, I think it was a steep gradient. It was difficult. The language it's a Category 5 language. It's very difficult. So yeah, the difficulty of the experience, it goes without saying. I just embraced it. I gave myself realistic expectations and I could see what it was, but I think you embrace it and you're grateful for it and you recognize the blessings and the benefits that can come from that experience. It was tough. We're going to get up and grind. But I savored the experience, and I'm there to serve the Lord. That's why I'm there. That's my primary motivation. And that's it. If you've got that, then you can do it. And not only that, so you take any mission in the world, think about your find to teach ratio, right? So it's very interesting. So in my mission, our find to teach ratio was like 95-5.
Yeah.
We didn't teach much. We didn't get that opportunity. So we were knocking doors every day, all day long, and also doing street contacting. Those were the two things that we did. And if we had a chance to teach, that was just an incredible gift because we rarely got to teach. It's a primarily Buddhist country. Not very many people were interested. So you face a lot of rejection. You normalize those things. Right? You normalize that, you set your expectations, and then you appreciate and enjoy that experience. I think in my first 4 months, I served out on the coast by the Sea of Japan in a city called Gangnam. And I think we taught, I don't know, I don't think more than 10 times in 4 months. That was it. Yeah, not a lot.
Yeah. That's tough to keep your motivation up.
Yeah. So you're walking down the street, right? Back then, this is before smartphones or anything like that. My pocket is full of 3x5 index cards with vocabulary words and phrases and things like that. And I'm just drilling, right? I'm drilling. And you just take advantage of the opportunities. I've got a little dictionary in my other pocket. And you're just doing your best and you're getting better and better. I remember, I think it was maybe in my 4th month, my second companion was also native, spoke no English. So I'm on to my second companion. And by the way, I had the most incredible first and second trainers. God bless them forever. They were so amazing. His name was Kim Nam-soo. And in the 4th month, I remember we're in the apartment and he turns to me and he talks to me and he says a whole sentence. And I got the whole sentence. And I didn't have to translate from English to Korean, right? I wasn't going back and forth on my language tracks, but I got it. I comprehended the whole sentence as he said it. And I just looked around and I thought, this is a miracle. What just happened?
Yeah.
I just understood what he said, the whole sentence. And I was just elated. And that was a huge milestone. And I started building that Korean track, right? That language track. So that was it's just something that comes to mind. It was so exciting.
Learning a language as well as you do on a mission as an adult is such an interesting experience because most of us learn language when we're children and we don't have enough wherewithal or we don't have the meta thinking to think I'm learning. You don't think about learning a language, right?
No.
But it's cool when you're an adult and you think, I remember reading for the first time in Cambodian, and it's like looking back at yourself as a 3-year-old and being impressed with yourself that you can read, right? Which you don't do as a 3-year-old.
but
Yeah.
very cool experience to learn a language as well as you do on a mission as an adult.
When I got to Korea, my first area was way out in the boonies in the rice paddies. And the mission president said, "We're sending you to an outpost. See you in a few months." And I got my trainer, who was a native Korean, spoke no English. We got on a bus and we went for 5 hours out to the coast, out to nowhere. Here we go. Let's get started. So it's a shock, right? Talk about culture shock. Let me transition into a concept that I think is really important. One of the things that I learned, or that I learned even at a deeper level as a missionary in Korea, is that you move away from what in developmental psychology we call contingent self-esteem. Contingent self-esteem means that much of your self-concept as you're doing identity formation is based on social approval. It's based on the feedback, the responses that you get from others. When you go out to Korea and you go to the rice paddies and you're out in the middle of nowhere, that's over. So you got to learn how to toil in obscurity. And that's a beautiful thing because it weans you away from contingent self-esteem, and you have to learn who God is and who you are. That will serve you for the rest of your life, because when you come back, you're going to be participating in social hierarchies wherever you are. Football team, you're at school, you go into the business world. Welcome to the life of humans in all of their social collectives. You've learned who you are outside of that, if that makes sense. That is a great gift, and that can serve you for the rest of your life. So I thought I would just add that because that's very, very important. And a mission can help you with that.
I think it's a great point. I think I can't think of a very good parallel for a time in life that you get the chance to learn yourself in that way, because you are so focused on a very narrow scope of things rather than your friends and your social media platforms and everything else that tends to occupy your space and time and mind. You end up focusing a lot on who am I, what do I want, and then the spiritual of it of like, what is my relationship with God? But I think you're right. It's tremendously valuable.
I was just curious, missions are chock full of leadership opportunities, and obviously leadership is something you've championed in your career. And I'm just curious how your experiences were in the mission as you started to come into these leadership roles.
Well, I think what I learned was that you just lead by example and forget about title and position and authority. Like, just forget about it. It doesn't matter. Who cares? Nobody cares what your positions are. It's the way that you're interacting. It's the way that you're influencing. It's the way that you're leading. I think that's what I learned. It's like in the church. It doesn't matter where you serve. It's how. I don't care what your church resume is. Please don't show me that. I don't care. There's no such thing as a qualification in the church. You're there. You're following the Savior. He's the perfect example. That's what it's all about. All of these accessories and artifacts that come with hierarchy, division of labor, roles and responsibilities, that's fine. We need those to run an organization. But please don't mistake those things as proxies for leadership. They're not. Mm-hmm. They're just necessary to get the job done. But focus on influence, right? The essence, the best synonym for leadership in the English language is influence, positive influence to create and accomplish meaningful goals. That's what it's all about. So I think that's what I learned. I learned to just try to work in a collaborative way with people and have a humble attitude, try to contribute. Let me give you a conceptual tool that might help. So think about influence on a spectrum. Okay. We'll call it the spectrum of influence. At one end, you've got manipulation. At the other end, you've got coercion. So manipulation is a mode of influence based on deceit. And a lot of people, that's how they're taught and socialized to get what they want. So manipulation at one end. So there's pathology there. You go to the other end, you have coercion. Coercion is based on force. Right? So we're going to press people into service to extract what we want. We're going to exploit people that way. So we're going to use our power tools. So we have our tricks over here. We have our power tools over here. Again, there's pathology here, but a lot of people are trained, socialized, and influenced to use coercion. What do we learn in the gospel? If you go left or right, east or west, you're abdicating leadership. You're not even leading anymore. So what's in the middle? Persuasion. Yep. The middle is persuasion, legitimate forms of influence. What are they? Vision, encouragement, coaching, data, logic, all of the things that you can do to help people, to encourage them, to persuade them, legitimate forms of influence. Stay away from the tyranny and the pathology at the extremes, right? Because you're abdicating leadership. You go left or right, you're abdicating. Like you're not leading anymore. The world doesn't teach that. The world teaches go to manipulation, go to coercion to get what you want. It has nothing to do with leadership as an applied discipline, nothing. So I think as a missionary, you can learn that, right? You can learn that.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing.
You had mentioned when we spoke briefly before, some of the overall things that you learned as far as like how ethnocentric we tend to be, especially as teenagers, and how we think, man, we know the world, and how gaining that global perspective is valuable, and then how that kind of leads to enhanced critical thinking.
Yes. Yeah, that's one thing that I learned on my mission is the extent of my ethnocentricity. You think you're the center of the universe, and you are transported and you are parachuted in to a completely different world, and you're re-socialized, and you gain perspective about the world, about who you are. It's very humbling, and it's very helpful. It accelerates your development as a person. And if you're paying attention and you're trying to develop Christ-like attributes, that it helps you see others you see the equality of the human family, and you get rid of, I don't know how else to say it, junk theories of superiority, strains of elitism, this idea of nobility or aristocracy. It is not a thing in Christ's church. That's not a thing. And so you have a chance to shed those things, disabuse yourself of some of those ideas that were part of your socialization or whatever it might be, but you're starting to see yourself with much more clarity than ever before. That will help you for the rest of your life in so many ways, right? Because you're a bundle of demographics, Sam and Jake, you're a bundle of demographics and psychographics and cultural attributes. And then then you encounter people that have very different bundles than you do. And you learn to love them with a very informed, intelligent love that you've learned from the Savior. And so then when you read his encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well, you're blown away. You're absolutely blown away because you understand what that means. You understand the collision, the cultural collision that's happening. And so it gives you a whole new understanding of things. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what it did for me.
I think that applies to all of us. Sam and I served in Southeast Asia. We had similar experiences going to a place we'd never even dreamt of. And I can definitely say that the ideas that I had about who I was or what being an American meant versus being a son of God and seeing my spiritual brothers and sisters is just life-changing. And you continue to hold that through your life. So
Precisely.
Yeah. And really quick, before we close up, just wanted to ask a couple final questions. And one was, if there was a top secular lesson that you took from your mission, what would that be?
I could probably come up with a list, but I'll give you one
Sure.
top of mind.
Sure.
You've got to learn how to do little things for a long time. Eventually in life, those things will compound and they will make you who you are. And so you've got to learn that basic daily discipline, the consistency, the resilience, the stamina, the endurance. You have to learn how to do little things for a long time. If you learn how to do that, it makes me think. I'll give you one example. After 5 years of study and research, I went back to Oxford for my verbal defense of my dissertation. And my primary advisor told me, he said, "Tim, this is going to be ceremonial. Just enjoy it. It's going to be, perfunctory. Just enjoy it. You've met all the requirements. Your dissertation looks great, and just enjoy it." And at Oxford, as you might imagine, it's medieval. So you have to put on your black robes, defense. So I go into Nuffield College and my examiners are there, and they grilled me hard for 2 hours. And as we got more and more into it, I started to get worried, and I thought, this is not feeling ceremonial. This is something different. After 2 hours, they excused me out of the room. They got together, discussed. They invited me back into the room after a few minutes and proceeded to tell me that I had failed the exam. Are you kidding? After 5 years? No way. Like, I had done everything, that I had met all the requirements. My advisor had walked me through everything. That's not possible. But that's exactly what happened. I was shattered. But they said, "No, we want another chapter. We want more statistical analysis. We want more rigor here. We want more literature review there." Really? After 5 years? So my wife, fortunately, she was very encouraging. She lifted me up off the ground, picked me up, and I went back to work. It took another year, another full year. So after 6 years, we crossed the finish line. You don't know what kind of adversity or challenges that you may face, but you prepare for that. I started preparing for that a long time before. And Korea helped me. My mission helped me. Do little things for a long time. You're going to need the resilience. So there's one for you, Jake.
Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. Last question. If there's a young man or young woman who's considering going on a mission, but might have some hesitations, what are your advice to them? Do you think they should go for it, or what would you say to someone like that?
No, don't go if you're not ready. You don't go for other people. You don't go for your parents. You don't go for the church. You don't go for your leaders. You don't go for any of those reasons. Now, I realize a lot of missionaries do go for those reasons, but if I can get your attention, I would say time out. Time out. Take some time and figure it out. The reason you go is to serve the Lord because you love him. And you don't go thinking about all that you're going to get out of it and all of the rewards. You're not thinking about return on investment. You're not thinking about all of these other things. You're not thinking about social status. You're not thinking about any of that stuff. Just clear the decks of all of that. Just clear the decks and go figure out who you are and go figure out who God is and who Jesus Christ is. Build your relationship with them. Then you'll know. At some point, you'll know because you will want to go, because you want to be a missionary, because you want to serve the Lord. That's why you go. Everything else is secondary. Those are secondary purposes, which hopefully, if you went based on those reasons, hopefully those will turn into a love of the Lord, which becomes your primary motivation. But if you're not there yet, no. Time out. You're going to go, if you're not ready, you're going to hit the wall. You work 14 hours a day. Okay. You don't want to go based on a secondary motivation. You want to know why you're going to serve the Lord. And so take the time. Be patient with yourself. Forget about the social pressure that you might be feeling. I know it's difficult. The expectations, all of the nonsense that we go through, but that's not it. You've got to go through that deeply personal process of that relationship with Jesus Christ. And then maybe it's time to go, but not before that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Tim, we'll let you go, but appreciate your time. You're such a thoughtful person, and you clearly care a lot about your mission, your experience, and I'm glad that I was able to work with you and know you and be in your network. So thank you for the time again.
Privilege. Yeah. No, it's a privilege. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for what you're doing. Yes, it's a privilege. I wouldn't trade my mission for anything. That's what it means to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks for being willing to talk about it.
Oh, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll let you go.
Those early points that he was making about leadership and these requirements for society to have these, the laws of safety, basically. I don't know. I was just thinking about those and thinking about my family and how I'm raising my kids and the relationship that I have with them. And when he was talking about the fear or a level of safety where these kids can feel like they're contributing and there's no, reluctance. Some of that stuff that he had to share was really cool and leaves me with a lot to think about going forward.
On that topic, he talked about how psychological safety comes by modeling and rewarding vulnerability. I'm probably messing it up, but
No, you're doing great.
Think about how vulnerable you end up being when you leave everything that you know, everything that you're comfortable with, everything that you do well to go and do what you do on a mission experience. And I just think there's a really good payoff there from that in terms of what you learn. Here's another point that I liked. What I am hoping to do in this podcast is highlight this quote unquote secular, quote unquote non-religious benefits that come from missionary service. Unless you really care about what you're doing and why you're there, the really valuable benefits that translate to being quote unquote secular benefits really don't come through. You can still learn to cook on your own and do your own laundry, and you can learn to teach to some degree, right? Or you can learn to have good study habits. But those really deep and powerful things of understanding yourself and learning how to overcome failure, experiences of failure, all of those things really come as a result of being bought into the mission of why you're there, being bought into the spiritual side of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think you're going to get out what you put into it. And a mission, as you and I both know, requires a serious investment, not just an investment of time, but an investment of all the emotions and fear and hesitations and all those things. You kind of have to cast them to the side and jump into it. And you do it out of a commitment, out of a love for the gospel, out of a love for your fellow human beings, and in some ways out of a responsibility to the church, that you've been blessed by. You want to go and share those experiences with other people. And ultimately, you get to see that happen for other people in many cases on your mission, whether it's someone who's been reactivated or someone you've been able to teach the lessons to. It's just a unique experience that you won't have anywhere else doing anything else. So yeah, I 100% agree. I think there is a high investment involved, and don't let anyone kid you that there's not, because if there wasn't, then it might not be worth it in the first place.
Yeah, that's well said.
All right, that's it for the pod. Thanks to Jake for coming on to co-host, and thanks to Tim again for making the time to share about his mission and teach some of those really cool principles. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode. See you then.